Covid-19 drove hundreds of Africans out of Guangzhou. A generational mixed race children is their legacy. CNN, when the coronavirus pandemic ground China to a near halt in early February last year, Youssef Dieng jetted back to Dakar for he thought a brief sojourn. In reality, it was a year before Dieng, who had worked as a good trader in the manufacturing hub of Guangzhou in southern China for 2 decades, could return on an air ticket 3 times the usual cost and a complicated business visa. By then, the pandemic had driven hundreds of Africans out of Guangzhou, sparked the most severe anti-black racial clashes in China in decades, and remade business operations with Chinese factories connecting with African customers directly over e-commerce platform. Now it is very quiet. Diang says of Little Africa, a nook of Guangzhou, informally named after the swell of thriving African businessmen who once lived, ate, and prayed there in huge numbers. Not many foreigners now, and all the small shops are closed. Small business around here, no more. A shop in Little Africa in Guangzhou in 2019. Many small stores in this area are now shuttled. At the turn of the 21st century, Guangzhou, already a magnet for internal migrants, became an accidental experiment in multiculturalism in China, as loose immigration rules and factories churning out cheap products attracted droves of African entrepreneurs. Business boomed, and by 2012, as many as 100,000 sub-Saharan Africans had flocked to the city, according to Prof. Adams Bodomo's book Africans in Asia, China. While that figure was never verified, it pointed to the generally accepted opinion that between 2005 and 2012 at least, this was the largest African expatriate community in Asia. As interracial racial marriages in the community flourish, Bodomo theorized that in time in African Chinese minority would arise, becoming China's 57th ethnic group and demanding full citizenship right. Today, that looks unlikely. By April last year, just 4,550 Africans were living in Guangzhou, according to local authorities, including students and diplomats, as well as business people. 10 months on, more than a dozen experts and Africans who spoke with CNN said the number has further dwindled due to several repatriation flights to Nigeria and Kenya, and tougher coronavirus-era visa rules, with most foreigners barred from entry to China. Many who remain are rooted in China by Chinese wives and children. For the whole issue of African traders in Guangzhou, I suspected that era is over, says Gordon Matthews, professor and chair of the Department of Anthropology at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. I'm skeptical that their physical presence in the city will ever be at the scale that it has been. The business case. One reason for the decline of the African community over the past year is strictly business. In 2019 alone, over of the 2.95 million foreigners entering China through Guangzhou, 358,000 were from African countries, according to local officials. Many came on quick visits to buy from the region's factories, using African residents as middlemen to connect with Chinese wholesalers. When Covid-19 prevented foreigners from visiting China, the factory owners of the Four River Delta, often cited as the world's biggest urban area, had to rethink their business model. Many in the area, which included the cities of Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Foshan, and Dongguan, began advertising their services on e-commerce giants such as Alibaba. This allows them to connect with African customers directly rather than waiting for them to come to the city in person to place orders as had been the way for decades. Pat Chokuyen Chike has been in Guangzhou for nearly 2 decades, living on a business visa he renews each year. When COVID-19 hit, he stays to avoid being separated from his Chinese wife and three African Chinese children. He shuttled his clothing store, previously frequented by droves of visiting foreigners, and set up an Alibaba type service on Facebook, which is banned in China but can be accessed via a virtual private network. Park Chung Unye Chike, doing business with Chinese counterparts in Guangzhou during the pandemic. His online shop, Africa Chinese Trade Service, connects to about 20 factories he knows to his contacts in Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Guinea, and Ghana. The advantage, he says, is his clients know they're dealing with factories they can trust, but it's a competitive landscape. There are now hundreds of thousands of Chinese migrants in Africa who can easily order from Chinese factories themselves and sell to locals where they are living, cutting Africans out of the equation in their home nations. Some say that's what the Chinese authorities would prefer. China wants to be the middleman and not have Africans in its borders, says Matthews, author of The World in Guangzhou. So it would make much more sense for the Chinese merchant to move to Africa rather than having the Africans to go to China. Racial tensions. For centuries, Guangzhou has intermittently been a nerve center for migrants, whether internal or foreign. When African traders arrived in the city in the early 2000s, they formed a particularly visible enclave, partly because they tended to congregate in one or two relatively small areas and partly because black skin had not before been widely seen in China in large numbers. The Africans also brought with them value systems that did not easily fit in with China's political environment. Many are deeply religious, founding underground Christian churches, which sometimes attracted Chinese congregations, a deeply contentious practice in a century where proselytizing by foreigners is illegal. As Beijing cracked down on non-state sanctioned religion in recent years, their house churches were raided and shut down by local police. Defending area of Guangzhou, in which Little Africa is located, has seen an increased police presence in recent years. Africans from Muslim nations also continue to practice Islam, a religion Guangzhou has a long connection with, being home to China's oldest mosque. Guangzhou attracted communities of Hui and Uyghurs, Muslim minorities in China who began serving halal food to the African incomers, as did a range of Middle Eastern eateries. But in recent years, as hostility to Islamic populations increased across China in the wake of the crackdown on Islam in the country's western region of Xinjiang, Africans have reported that restaurants serving halal food began to remove Arabic writing from their menus and signage. Africans also formed small democracies within their own communities, voting for a head of each nation within Guangzhou to lobby on their behalf with the local authorities on matters such as visas. Permanent residency for foreigners is extremely rare in China, and most African parents live in the status of constantly renewing one-year visas. A Chinese woman in Guangzhou with her baby in 2016. Those who cannot secure these often simply overstayed, creating an underground population of illegal African migrants in the city. A leaked WikiLeaks cable from 2008 revealed the central government was concerned by this and had quietly funded research into the African community's impact on crime, underground religion, and missed tax revenue. In 2011, the provincial authorities clamped down on overstayers, offering rewards to Chinese who turned them in, and making it illegal for informers, employers, hoteliers, or educational institutes to serve them. An increased police presence was seen in Little Africa from 2015 onwards. Then, in 2014, the government embarked on the beautification of Little Africa. The once rural village consumed by the city, the campaign tore down signage in the area that celebrated the foreign trade, swapped up street stalls serving local cuisines, and introduced a heavy police presence. As policing of the community increased, several Africans running logistics, warehouses told CNN that police installed CCTV cameras inside their premises, as well as X-ray scanners and devices plugged into their Wi-Fi routers, in an apparent bid to clamp down in illegal export. CNN reached out to officials in Guangdong, the province of which Guangzhou is the capital, for comments in these claims, but did not receive the response. Racism in China. While many Africans spoke with living Guangzhou in the years leading up to the pandemic, much of the community remained often rooted by marriages, children, a lack of better opportunity in Africa or elsewhere, and ultimately a sense of home. While there is no official data on how many Africans in Guangzhou married Chinese women, a walk through the strip malls of Little Africa in recent years made it clear. Scores of shops are run by an African husband and his Chinese wife, with their children running down the corridors. Yet that sense of belonging was rocked for many last of April, when Africans across the city were evicted from their homes and hotels and forced to live on the street. After a handful of Nigerians tested positive for COVID-19, Guangzhou authorities quarantined and tested Africans all across the city, sparking unproven fears that Africans were vectors of the virus. Last year, Chinese Foreign Minister spokesman Zhao Lijiang said the Chinese government threat all foreigners in China equally, opposed any differentiative practices targeted on specific groups of people, and has zero tolerance for discriminatory words and actions. An African in Guangzhou is tested for coronavirus at his apartment. Still, Vaser Dieng, a sofa seller in Senegal who imported from China, remembers that incident, which went viral on Twitter in Africa. She says she has no desire to go to Guangzhou once coronavirus restrictions lift. I'm hesitant now to go to China from what I have heard since COVID started and how they treat people, he says. Back in Guangzhou, Nigerian father of three chick says the way he is treated by some Chinese residents in his home city makes him feel they suspected Africans are the virus. It's something, he says, he tries not to think about. Not everyone is comfortable in another's country, he added, as many Africans in Guangzhou, however, report the city's public security bureaus has been lenient with visas for those with Chinese partners and children during the pandemic. Normally, a foreigner would have to leave and re-enter China to activate the visa, something several Africans told the CNN they had not been made to do, as it would trigger the need for the long quarantine. Feli Wamba in Winnipeg, Canada. Despite the challenges, many Africans want to return to their old lives in China. Congolese trader Feli Wamba left the country during the New Year holiday in 2020 and has been living in Winnipeg since. After 2 decades in Guangzhou, he'd earned enough money to apply for Canadian citizenship and buy a home there. But the Winnipeg winter has been bitterly cold, and he says he has few friends. Yet he cannot get back into China. His business visa expired when he was in Canada, and to get a new one requires an invitation letter from local officials, hard for him to obtain from another continent. In the meantime, he is paying rent on his office and apartment in China. He is considering closing his languishing logistic business there. If he can't return soon, if really it is constant going on like this, then I prefer to get out and relax, he said. See if I can do something in Africa. The legacy. Whatever their future, the heyday of African trade, life, and love in Guangzhou has produced a generation of African Chinese children. While many are still adolescents, some have reached adulthood and are navigating how their mixed identity will fit into China's increasingly nationalist landscape. Chinese Congolese singer and reality TV star Chong Pei-Pei. Zhong Pei-Pei, 24, says her parents met at the turn of the century in Guangzhou, where her Congolese father was a graduate school and her Chinese mother was doing business. They fell in love and moved to Brazzaville, but after her father died when she was a toddler, she grew up in China with her grandparents. They renamed her Chong Pei-Pei, a name that lawfully translates to China, Africa. Since then, she says she has grappled with not being Chinese enough in China. She said the Shanghai school teachers once told her class she spoke the Mandarin well for a foreigner. I was so confused because how come I'm a foreigner? She remembers thinking. But she also has dealt with not being considered black enough in Congo. Last year, her identity came to the fore when producers of the Chinese version of K-pop reality TV show produced Camp 2020 invited her to star in the series. When Chong emerged from the show, she was a trending topic on China's Twitter-like Weibo platform, but not for the right reasons. Many are attacking her for her race. I was looking at my phone and I had 200,000 messages or something. She says of reconnecting to the world after exiting the show. The online attacks came at the same time authorities in Guangzhou were accused of mistreating Africans there. Zhang Peifei grew up in Shanghai, a daughter of the Congolese father and Chinese mother. Yet Chong says she was also received messages of support and subsequently used the platform to launch a music career. For families in Guangzhou, Afro-Chinese celebrities like Chong could be helpful for their children. Pastor Ignatius, a Nigerian evangelical preacher who has three African Chinese children under the age of 12, hopes that what is happening in Japan might happen here, repre- representing the Afro-Japanese community there, from which many celebrated figures have emerged, such as tennis player Naomi Osaka. What we see from the school, they are very accepting, though there are time of students discrimination here, he says, of the public Chinese school his children attends in Guangzhou. They are they all have Chinese passport. Without one, they would not be eligible for free education or health care. Dual nationality is forbidden. Chike, who was who also has three African Chinese children under age 13, says while there is more discrimination for the family to contend with in recent years, as long as my kids know who I am, where I'm from, they are free to live in the society they feel will be most beneficial. Matthews, the Hong Kong-based anthropologist, previously speculated during the height of African migration to Guangzhou that the African community could provide China with its own Barack Obama figure, a non-Han leader. In an era of growing nationalism, he now believes this community of African Chinese children will more likely dilute to the point where they won't have a collective voice. They will probably blend in the overall landscape of Guangzhou because it has so many people from all of the places, says Matthews. I don't think they will be noticeable. It will be a few hundred people.